Hi, everybody. Welcome to Do I Need a Bigger Mouthpiece, a podcast about trombone pedagogy. So this morning, both Alex and I are going to be talking about three different topics, three items in which any student could apply over the course of a year, 2 years, seeing progress before that time frame, but three things that we both feel are very important and somewhat undervalued. And both Alex and I are going to be talking about those. And I hope that you're able to take a couple things from this episode in particular and immediately begin applying them into your own daily practice and seeing some results.
Yeah.
So
Today's all about simplicity. We thought we'd approach things with a really honest lens and just put you in a place where you can walk away and say, you know what? I'm really looking to improve. And I may not be the most serious trombonist yet, but I want to be. And maybe you don't play trombone, maybe you play euphonium, or you play horn, or you play trumpet or tuba. These are all encompassing and really valuable ideas that will set you up. Now we're making a couple assumptions to begin. And those assumptions are that one, you practice. Not a lot, not a little. It doesn't really matter how much, but the idea that you take the horn home and you put it on your face every day or at least every other day is a starting place that we're starting from here. So that's our first assumption. Our second assumption is that you are really interested in playing, and this is serious for you. Maybe you want to make playing music your career. Maybe you want to make teaching music your career. Maybe you don't. And you know that you want to do something else, but you know that trombone is really important to you. And the idea of growing a lifelong habit of excellence and playing at a high level is something that you want to pursue. So, regardless of where in those categories you fall, there's something here for you. And the idea is we can help you build forward with your playing to a place where you can really enjoy the experience better, and you can enjoy the experience of getting better, which is kind of half the battle, right? Playing well is one thing, enjoying the process of improving, that's a different game, because in reality, you're never going to be really happy with your playing, but you can be happy with the journey of getting better and watching your playing grow. I like to think that that's way more beneficial.
definitely. And I think if you're sitting here listening to this podcast and you're a younger student, perhaps you are in private lessons, perhaps you're not. I can speak from my own example in which I was in high school. I had a private lessons teacher, but it wasn't a really focused study with said teacher. We were more or less meandering around all state etudes and those things. And I had a lot of questions as I was going off into college. I wanted to know what I needed to do to get better. From my junior year on in particular, but even, my sophomore year, I had sort of a blueprint. I had band warm-ups. I had printouts of etudes. I didn't have a whole lot else. And that was a different day and age in which the resources that we currently have available, if you just look at Alex's website, if you look at Trombone Guide and you look at the resources available on Trombone Guide, that's a great starting spot. There's going to be resources, particularly with one of the topics that I'm talking about today, that I'm going to work to produce over the next couple of weeks. And so there's going to be tangible things that not only you can consider, but then you can go just get and then start working on. And these are things that we have fair confidence in promising are going to be good things that you can work on and things that will lead to not only a feeling of, oh, I'm actually doing something that's putting me on the path forward, but you will then begin to see the effects of it in the other aspects of your playing. So you want to just jump in with your number one, Alex?
Yeah, sure. I can start it off. I think that if you're gonna try and make changes, we want to make them small and gradual. But one of the more immediate shifts that you can take in your playing is to just make an uncompromising promise to yourself that when you practice, you're going to get a little bit of time, 6 out of 7 days out of the week, and two, that time, if nothing else, is going to be fundamentals. And let me talk a little bit about what I mean. I'm not talking about getting an hour of fundamentals a day at the beginning. Sure, if you're a professional, you probably need 90 minutes of fundamentals and warm up a day. That's what I need. If I do less than that, I don't sound good. I don't feel good. I can do it for a few days, and after that, it really starts to go downhill, and it's not pretty. For me, The uncompromising warm-up slash fundamental promise, for a high school student is 20 minutes. If you don't do anything else on the horn in a day, you get 20 minutes of long tones or lip slurs or playing Roshus with no tongue just to get everything connected. And like a lot of people have really good material that's available for this sort of thing. If you go to Brad Edwards' website, you can find some pretty decent options that fit into this time parameter. And Dr. Edwards' pedagogy is excellent, so you're going to find exactly what you need. I have some warm-ups on Trombone Guide that will do this.
And there's materials that are time tested. The Remington warm-ups have existed and been permeated for as long as they have for a reason. And so if you're a student who knows in so many ways nothing about where you want to go, starting with the Remington warm-ups and their simplicity, doing them slowly with a tuner and with a metronome, 20 minutes of that, promise you, from a foundational standpoint, you are going to be a more sound trombonist in your approach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The Remington warm-ups are a really, really solid place to start. We've also got the Marsteller book, Basic Routines. The Arbins book is solid. It's not necessarily a warm-up per se, but it certainly can be used that way. Is a good place to be.
For sure. A warm-up that I like, or a fundamental routine approach, perhaps this exceeds high school in 20 minutes. But if you take the Schlossberg book, which we're familiar with, if you
Yeah.
take the Schlossberg book and you do 1, 11, 21, 31, 41, etc., it goes up to, oh gosh, don't quote me at the moment. I think it goes into the 130s. And so you have some sort of awkward numbering that you have to traverse. But if you do that, that's something that I've done a couple of different times, especially when I find myself in a funk. And I'll do that. And that's a 10-day routine right there. It's all essentially the same material, but you are rotating. And for my money, I like the idea of an indelible fundamental routine that does not change. I think there is some credence to that, but I also like rotating material that's very similar in and out so that I'm doing the same types of things. I'm just doing slightly different variations of those exercises. For me, at least, that captures my attention. That makes me feel like I'm not getting in a rut.
What do you think, Kevin? If we were to hit all the categories here, we got lip slurs, long tones, basic articulation. What else is on your list?
I think for younger students in particular, maybe for everybody, certainly for myself, I have the first section of my routine is called EOS, which is establishment of sound. Essentially, those are your Arnold Jacobs like material of the yada da 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 da
Warm-up song, of course.
da 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 da. During that point, I'm able to explore my sound, get the sound that I have in my head, and work towards that. Before I do that, perhaps even, I spend about 7 minutes, and this is something that I saw initially from Brian Hecht. I think he calls it the breakfast, and it's like a 7 to 10 minute, could be longer for him if I cannot remember correctly, so don't quote me on that. But a dedication to just mouthpiece buzzing, particularly in the low register and getting everything moving. This is also backed up in an article written by the tubist for the Boston Symphony, Mike Roylance. And that dedication to mouthpiece buzzing, then followed by exercises like that, before I even get into lip slurs in particular, has always fared well for me. It's allowed me to find myself. And honestly, after I do that entire process over the course of about 20 to 23 minutes, I'm technically warm. I could technically move forward and do what I have to do if I'm in a pinch.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of approaches to this, and it's always interesting to hear how different people both approach it, but also how they perceive things differently, which are the same. I'm always reminded of that cartoon, two people looking down at the number. One person sees a 6, one person sees a 9, but it's the same number. And in many ways, we have a chicken or egg situation with tone production, right? We've got buzz and we've got air, and some players conceive of the experience as your buzz is formed by your lips, and then you add air, and that gives you a sound. And other players conceive of this experience as we blow air through the aperture and the lips buzz around it. and we are describing the same experience, but depending on how people's neural map is wired and structured and laid out, they will experience that entirely differently. And this is something I've discovered in my teaching that's super interesting to work with students through, is how to mind map what is going on with a buzz. It's the same. People do it the same way. It is the same act, but the way it is interpreted changes everything. Everything about how you play, everything about how you interact with the horn. And it really changes the experience for a student to be able to see it in both ways, because then you have two different avenues to improve and they can chase each other. So you can build one up and then the other and then the other and the other, and you get faster improvement chasing both avenues for sure.
I love that. So make time each day or every other day if you're an every other day practicer, but put your fundamentals first. I think that's a great first point.
Point one. Nailed it.
Point
we can
one.
move on. What do you have
Excellent.
for your first point, Kevin?
So my first point is scale practice and its practical use. And I selected that because I feel strongly that educators, and I have been guilty of this myself, often assign scales to students as they are learning either in band class, they have scale pass offs, or in their private lessons, they are assigned scales. And there's little, if no reason for their validity given. So it's like,
This
hey,
one
bring.
does get me angry. I will admit, I think too many times I've interacted with students that either fake it and don't know their scales at all, or have no idea why they should know their scales other than, hey, can you play a G major scale? Well, that's not a useful question to ask, and it's not really a useful piece of knowledge to have. Great, I know my major scales. Okay, what does that get you? What does that mean?
Exactly. What does that mean? And the second frustration that I feel with this is not only is there no reason given, but, and I was case in point with this, I was taught scales in such a way, or at least I wasn't given the formula rather of how major scales are constructed. I more or less stumbled onto it just myself. So students, especially high school students, will look at an E major scale as if it is a rattlesnake versus an E flat major scale, which is a puppy. And essentially, they're the exact same thing. They're just fretted slightly different. And because students don't understand the actual breakdown of those, they begin to associate negative feelings with certain scales and non-negative feelings with others. They think that
Interesting. I've not thought of it this way.
the B major scale all of a sudden is this thing that a student, oh, I could never play the B major scale. And it's like, you very much could play the B major scale. It's actually just like the B flat scale. And so that's something that I've learned is in my own teaching is where I've seen it mostly and had to sort of demystify that process. But back to the first point about what are we getting out of it? Scale practice improves so many things about our playing. Being able to play our scales well. I have three things right off the bat that I think if you get more proficient in scales, you will get better at these things. Musical literacy. The music that you are reading is composed of scales and arpeggios with the outliers of some non-chordal tones to accentuate the melody, right? And so you will see scalular passages all over the place. And as you learn your scales proficiently, and then you are looking at music, you are no longer going to be going note by note by note by note by note as you read the music. You will begin to recognize string of pattern, string of pattern, string of pattern, string of pattern. And of course, like I said, there's going to be some outliers there. There's going to be, especially if you have some chromatic, non-chord tones that accentuate the melody or do some funny things, French music, whatever. There's so many examples of that. But for the most part, when you're talking about sight reading, especially the types of sight reading that you may or may not have to do as a younger student, you're going to be a rock star because you recognize these patterns so much better for knowing your scales. And I'll talk about what knowing your scales means in just a second. But besides musical literacy, we also can incorporate our scale practice into range. And so working on arpeggios in particular, both as lip slur patterns and articulated, only in my opinion, after we're more comfortable using just the air,
Yep, that's
then
right.
we are learning our arpeggios really well. And we have built-in exercises that are completely copyright free that are going to allow us to expand our range. So with all of my students, with my own practice, I try and look at every key center as, can I do this 2 octaves in any sort of given transposition, right? And as I'm comfortable doing that, then let's take, for instance, just B flat. We'll just say good old B flat major from B flat second line to the B flat 4 ledger lines above the bass clef. Once I feel comfortable doing that, I then have the liberty to add the F below that so that I am approaching that high B flat while knocking my camera over. I'm approaching that high B flat from the F and not just the B flat. And then as I get more comfortable there, I can add the D above that B flat. And this is an infinite thing that we can continue to do, where we are continually refining our knowledge of said arpeggio, but we are also expanding upon what we can do technically. We have such a bevy of good resources, like you mentioned, Alex, but there's a reason that the Remington has stood the test of time. There's a reason Arbin, there's a reason for Schlossberg, there's a reason for Marsteller. You know, it doesn't make your new materials or any materials that I may produce any less valid. They have their absolute place. And you have done a creative job of finding the gaps that need to be filled, and those are important. But the building blocks, those don't need to be, the wheel doesn't need to be reinvented because it's still rolling, in my opinion. And then the last thing, not to a lesser degree, but you can get this a number of ways, but scale practice also is inducive to great technical practice. And I, for one, I don't know how you feel, Alex. I still feel like I've never gotten out of the practicing my scale slowly phase. Frankly, I always feel like anytime I really start to push the needle, I go, there's a reason I should keep practicing this at quarter note equals 60. But on occasion, I'll go beyond that, right? Especially if I'm working on something that calls for me to be working on, crisp or light 16th note articulation. You can work on these scales. There's a rotating scale pattern that I really wish I would have had the name on the top of my head, but essentially you're going up the different modes in 16th notes all the way till you get to the second octave. If you crank that up to 76 or 84, that's a good way to work on some single tongue clarity and stuff like that, all within the guise of scale practice.
I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if you got this from Toby, but Toby has a scale pattern that we were always doing. And gosh, I think he started us at 70 or 72. And the double tongue started at 90. And he would push us to 104 and then the double tongue at 126. And it's kind of a diatonic growing pattern like that, but it has a few alterations in there and it loops pretty nicely. And so you do it 12 different patterns, 3 different passes through, once legato, once staccato, and once with double tongue at a faster speed. And I think when we were all doing it, it was about 18 minutes of your day. And I just remember doing this 1 click faster every day for like a 40-day period. And by the end, my tongue just never tripped. Everything was smooth as butter. It was unbelievable. And it didn't feel any easier necessarily until about day 10. And then suddenly everything felt really easy. Scales, it's not about the scale. The scale is useful. The scale is a pattern, but it actually doesn't matter if you know your scales. What matters is that your body knows your scales and that your brain can recognize patterns associated with your scales. Knowing a scale just to know a scale is pointless. And knowing a scale so that you can apply the knowledge of the scale is super valid and valuable and useful and gleans us so much benefit.
Definitely. Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. As far as students that are wondering how to go about practicing said scales, take a key a week. I promise you, a key a week. I do a key a day on the things that I do with scales. I rotate throughout the 12 keys over 12 days. But a key a week, that's all you have to do. And you will glean so much benefit from that. The last little cherry on top I'll say is, I have never met a player that can shed scales exceptionally well that isn't amazing.
Oh, that's totally true. That's a good
I
point. Once in a
I just
while, you
haven't.
meet someone that's very good that can't play their scales, but it's so rare. Whereas
Yeah.
everybody that can play their scales really well is a good player. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm
So
going to add in a little idea here. And this is, I don't mean to contradict you, but I'm going to take what you said and try and take it a step further. Rather than doing one key a week, I want you to consider pairing two keys together
mm,
every week that are tritones apart. So if you do E flat, pair it with A major. If you do D, pair it with A flat. Work on
mhm.
two keys together that are diatonically separated by a tritone. Because what this will do is it will force you to work on scale patterns for your slide hand that are opposite. You
Mhm,
cannot
mhm.
get a more difficult hand pattern than A flat, than D major. And by doing them in this sequence, you will train your brain on two very different steps together. And while your improvement might be slightly slower, the connectivity between those two will be very valuable for you harmonically as well.
Absolutely. I love that.
Play with that,
Thanks.
see what you think. All right, my second point, let's talk about tracking. So the practice tracker is a super useful tool. Everybody's heard that. Teachers, college professors, fellow graduate students, high school teachers, high school friends, everyone says to you, oh, you got to track your practice. Got to get a notebook, got to write stuff down. That's not a super helpful guide. I want to simplify it a little bit. You should have a notebook, yes, or a digital document, sure, fine, whatever makes you happy. But we have to talk about what the function of that book is. A practice notebook is not just to write things down. It is actually a physical verification of your work.
Mhm.
In many crafts, like music, let's say visual art world, as you can see from behind me, I paint when I'm not playing music. That's my big hobby. In that world, when you do something and you work at something, you try and get better, you have a list of receipts, the paintings you've made. You can look at them and they start off terrible. And maybe 20, 30 paintings in, they start to look nice. And maybe 50 to 100 paintings past that, they start to look really good. And this is your receipt trail. You can look back at them and say, I learned something from here to here. I improved from here to here. In the world of music, we don't have a physical piece of creative art that we have made to represent the work and time we've put in. And most importantly, there isn't something physical to reflect our growth. This is where the practice notebook becomes so valuable. And I recommend that you invest in this. You invest your time and your energy into this. You write neatly in it. You keep it organized. You make it look nice. If you're someone that enjoys using stickers or other art tools, markers, that sort of thing, decorate your practice journal. Make it a piece of art that you're proud to carry and treat it with respect, because on the days where you feel like you are not improving and you want to give up or you're very frustrated, you can look back at your practice tracker and it will stand as a testament to the work that you have done. It will exist as proof to dismiss the critic in your head that tells you you have not been doing the work, you are not good enough, you are not talented enough, you should just quit.
And that you've never experienced this before. So
Oh,
I love this, because if we don't write these things down, we will lie to ourselves. Unfortunately, despite our best intentions, that what we are experiencing are things that have never happened to us before. When in reality, we just have really bad memories about bad
really
times.
bad memories, really bad memories.
And so to jump off your point, Alex, something that I like to say that's pretty unique to the way I think about it, but maybe it can relate to some people listening. Write in your journal as if someone else one day is going to read it and actually want to get something out of it.
Mm.
Write it in such a way that it's going to be purposeful for someone else. And I speak from this very personally. When I was figuring out life during the quarantine period, in I have two still images in my head if I just recall them quickly. I can recall running on this trail outside of San Antonio that I would go to just to keep myself from being stir crazy. And while I was doing that, I was thinking about the things that I would be writing in my journal. Now, it went beyond practicing a little bit. It went more into like longer term goal setting, which you can include. There's nothing wrong with that. But I always have this mindset, and I still do to this day, and it's a little bit corny, but I have this mindset that one day I'm going to have like a grandchild that is going to read that and is going to want to know about what I was up to, because they're going to hear oh, he played trombone. And they're gonna be like, what does that entail? Or who cares? Or whatever.
Yeah, no one will
And
play trombone by that point.
well, you could argue. And so writing it that way gives me an intentional thought behind it. Not every day. And I will say that I right now is sort of a feast or famine with the way I go about it. But I continue to do it. So sort of borrow from your first point, Alex, I still do it. It's indelible. It doesn't, the process of committing to it doesn't change. And if it changes for long enough, I kind of throw some cold water on my face and I get back to it because I
Totally.
realize
You
it's
just got to
helpful.
show up, right? That's what it is. It's showing up.
Yeah.
It's never going to be perfect. Geez, I mean the number of sketchbooks that I have started and stopped and never finished as an artist, like it's a never-ending hole of a failure if you are a perfectionist, right? There's no space for perfectionism with this. You just have to start the process. The perfectionism
Yeah.
is in the act of continually showing up. It's not in each individual event.
Yes. And I think you have a pretty unique and helpful way of going about this also because you plan your practice out typically a week in advance,
I do.
correct?
Yeah, I'm a crazy person. So
Yeah.
I've taken to this because I just got so pissed off from analysis paralysis in the practice room when I was at BU doing my master's. I would have these periods where I'd sit in the practice room and the person next to me would be ripping through stuff and sounding really great and just there for hours. And, her playing was always so inspiring to me. And then I'd sit and I'd just be stunned as to what to do. And what I realized was that if I took an hour on Sunday nights and I built a practice tracker that made sense for what I needed in small chunks, I could map out every single 20-minute session, pretty close to accurate for the week. And if you're practicing 3 or 4 hours a day, at that time, I think I was doing closer to 4. So that's 4 times 3, that's 12 sessions of 20 minutes a day. And then, 12, 24, 36, 48, 52, 60, like you get almost 100 and 108, 110 practice sessions in a week. Even if you're being conservative one day a week, you're going to cross 100, right? And when you can look at 100 ideas on a sheet of paper, you can really try and balance problems out. And this directly relates to this idea of, like, practice trackers with curiosity, right?
Mhm.
You got the receipts. If you're sitting in the practice room, you're like, damn, my high range just sucks. I can't play high. I'm really struggling. Look back at last week's practice journal. Did you hit it at all? Did you work on high range? Maybe you didn't. Maybe it slipped through the radar. And oh, well, that explains that actually. I have no reason to be mad that I can't do this. I haven't practiced it. It's kind of fallen by the wayside. Or maybe you went the opposite route. You just burned your high range like really heavy for
Mhm.
4 days. You're playing a lot of, like, maybe a jazz band rehearsals, and then you're playing row shoes up in tenor clef because your teacher told you that was a good idea, and then you're playing high lip slurs because you want to just build the muscle, and then you're doing a lot of lip buzzing because you're trying to work on your tone with a mouthpiece or a rim. All of a sudden it all makes perfect sense. It paints the picture out and you're like, oh, no wonder I can't do this today. My face is cooked and I didn't even realize it. I didn't feel it, but yeah, the tissue's
You have the
perspiring.
receipts at that
Yeah,
point,
you've got the receipts. Exactly.
and
Exactly.
you can look back on that. And to that point, at when you get to that point, your first feeling is going to be frustration because
Oh,
even
despair. It's not frustration. It's despair. Let's not
even
lie to him, Kevin. It's
of
despair.
course, of course, even though you know logically why your high range is not reacting the way you want it to, you're pissed off because it's not. And your inkling is going to say, screw this, I'm going to dig in. Eh, bad idea. Don't do that.
Terrible idea. The worst of ideas.
Exactly. That is the moment for you to recognize that you are in process and to, I don't want to say necessarily pull back, but to do the things in your practice that only the superhuman among us do. And I don't do this well enough. And that is go back and listen. Practice in the opposite direction for a little bit. So if your high range is cooked, it's time to work on some soft, low, comfortable resonant playing for just a little bit. Okay, you're not going to fix it by doing that for 3 hours, but do it for a little bit and then go listen to great trombone. Go listen to great vocal. Go to a concert, go take a walk. This is this is such an all-encompassing process, and it is not about hurting yourself in a 8x8 cube for hours on a day by yourself.
Yeah, no,
So,
trombone should not be hard. And trombone practice should not be hard. Like it's a tactical calculation that you've made over time to ramp up your energy so that everything's easy and approachable. You know, like I just the older I get, the more I reject the idea that this is a place we come to challenge ourselves. It's not. This is a place we come to know ourselves and to learn more about ourselves and to try and improve, but it shouldn't feel like a war. It's just that's not what it is. And the more you frame it to yourself as like, I'm doing really hard things and it's really challenging, like that, you're setting yourself up for failure. That's not what it is. These are
mhm,
small, very surmountable steps that we plan tactically. The war is in the planning. It really is. You know, like you talk about like going to the gym. You know, you go to the gym the first time, you're not going to go for 2 hours. It doesn't make sense. You're turning the gym into a place where you do hard things. You might, you know, you want to start running. You might start by running half a mile or even a quarter of a mile just to begin, you know, just to get yourself used to it. You add distance slowly and you do it methodically. You know, if somebody says to you, I am not going to practice today. I'm not practicing today. That sounds very different than today on my practice tracker, I've actually got a rest day built in because I've been hitting it pretty hard. Do you see how that's
mhm.
totally a different framing? On one hand, we have somebody that has actively planned and made a choice to preserve their energy and recover so that the next day they can do better. It's all part of the plan. It's very methodically approached, and that's a different game than, yeah, I just didn't practice today. I didn't feel like it.
And you won't feel as guilty about not
You won't
practicing.
feel guilty at all. You shouldn't.
No,
You've made a
no,
plan. You're following your plan. You're if you want to talk about like the world of gaslighting yourself as a perfectionist, you've done everything right. You have checked all the green boxes. You planned a rest day, you're taking a rest day. In fact, there's a strong argument that if you don't take that rest day, you're really the one that's letting yourself down. You go back to the
absolutely.
room and you had a rest day in mind, that's not helpful. You're literally doing the wrong thing.
I totally agree with that. So point two for me is one that I really feel no ownership over, but have been the benefactor of quite a bit in my own practice. And that's getting the tongue out of the way. As a teacher, I've encountered a lot of students who, as they are playing the instrument for me, let's say we're working on etudes where both range and endurance become a problem. As they get more tired or as they approach something in the higher register, their tongue actually gets more heavy handed. And when I discuss this with them, it becomes obvious that they are confusing where the sound is coming from. They are in full belief that in order to play higher and more confidently, there has to be two things: more grip and more sort of um, percussive use of the tongue and stiff use of the tongue. When in reality, there needs to be less grip and more reliance on an abundance of air. And so, what I would tell students to do is going back to my idea about arpeggios, but this works just as well with etude practice, is work on your etudes completely glissed and with no tongue other than perhaps starting each note of the phrase. You could take it a step further and cut it out even there. And what that's going to show you is your deficiency and your reliance upon the air. And that's okay. When you first do it, it's going to be awful. Okay. It is going to show you so many problems as far as your reliance upon the tongue in order to get things going.
I do
But
really
that's
agree with that. That's like I feel like taking the tongue out and playing with no tongue is a silver bullet for 90% of people. It just solves so many problems real quick. You're giving your embouchure air tracking to build around. It understands how to bridge between partials. You're not going to have a lot of problems. You're not going to have a lot of tension points. You're going to play with less tension when you're playing with air like that. It just means that you're going to have better endurance as well.
exactly. And I think one of the things that I like to visually imagine as I do this with Bordonis, but with anything, is I imagine myself being what I call, and I haven't seen this movie, so it really, the reference doesn't land with me, but I imagine myself being an airbender.
You
Okay.
really haven't seen that show, not movie?
Oh, it's a show now.
Oh,
I haven't
this is
seen it.
embarrassing for you, dear Lord.
Well,
Oh,
I have
Evan.
plenty of time to watch. I have plenty of time to watch shows.
Yeah,
So
you should watch Avatar. It's excellent.
I'll
Um,
add that to the list.
the
And
the
so
the
I
Netflix show is good, not as good
uh,
as the original, different.
okay.
But a good standalone piece by itself when you take it separately. There's a tone that is present in the original cartoon that is so heartwarming and delightfully optimistic, and I highly recommend it.
Do they work on Bordonis without their tongue?
They
No.
might as well. The show's about air. You figure it out.
Okay, well, there you go. So I imagine myself being an airbender. And what is that to say visually? And you probably are not seeing me visually, but imagine my hand making sort of a curvy wave sort of symbol with my hand. And my air transitions in a very smooth way. Where I get into trouble, and especially where I will have a lack of response as I make leaps, is if I make very sudden and pointed shifts in the air. And the reason I think that I have more problems there is because my tongue is trying very hard to slot each giant shift, and my tongue is exceptionally stiff while I do it. And so if I imagine myself being very facile, there you go, SAT word, with the tongue, and the tongue is really easy, then that allows for the air to bend and sort of find where it needs to go versus be really tough and force its way. So glist more, do your Bordonis glist, do your Allstate Etudes glist in slow and in segments, but do this more and get off of your reliance for the tongue. I promise you that it is going to cost you when it matters in an audition, in a performance, whatever. Practice this, endurance will improve, sound is going to get a lot better too.
Couldn't agree more.
There you
I'm sure
go.
my students are sick of hearing it. I'm always telling people to take the tongue out of the equation. In fact, I try and avoid the tongue at all times as a general rule. Tongue as little as possible until you have to. And it seems to do a lot of wonders for my playing, at least, and it seems to do a lot of wonders for everybody else's playing too.
It simplifies what we're doing.
We like
It
that. We
becomes
like simple.
we're driving an automatic at that point, and I think that that's helpful. What's your final point, Alex?
All right. So this one's a little bit different. And I call this the commitment to three branches of self-commitment. And it starts with this idea, right? If you want to be serious about trombone and you want to take it as possibly as a profession, and I guess I'm talking to the people that are in high school that might want to study trombone and make a living doing music, or the people in college who are getting a degree in music, which I'm sure is a lot of our listeners. There are three branches of self-commitment you have to foster, because at the end of the day, when you play trombone for a living, there are three truths that are honest. The first is that you are paid for what you can do, not what you know. The second is that your value as a trombonist is always there, but the world of the music industry doesn't always recognize it financially. And the third is that you will determine your future based upon your ability to focus. Those three truths are very honest and self-evident. So to the first one, you have to understand that you are the product. You are forming a product based around what you can do. And that means you have to practice, obviously, but it also means you have to take care of your body, because your body is your ability to do things, and you only get one, right? And so there are a bunch of categories here. And I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian or an exercise coach, but I'm still going to speak to these in a very broad way. You need to drink water. You need to drink a lot of water, because your chops respond to constant levels of hydration. Not overhydration, not underhydration, but consistent hydration. Meaning, if you're drinking 3-4 cups of water a day, you need to always be drinking 3-4 cups of water a day. You don't want to spike that or drop it, because it will cause you change in your playing. You also want to avoid a lot of salty food as a general rule, because that dries out your chops and makes it difficult to play. It'll cause swelling. Sleep's not optional. You need to be sleeping enough. For some people, it's 6 hours a night. For some people, it's 8. For some people, it's 10. Whatever it is for you, that you are rested and your chops are getting rest, you need to be doing that.
I just want to interject really
Please
quickly.
jump in.
The all three of your points. I have drank too much water before. I have gone too gung ho. Actually messed with my blood pressure, funny enough. Like I got completely out of whack because I took it too far. So the consistency there, super important. Also, because I'm on a blood pressure kick, salty foods in general. If you're young and getting away with eating like crap,
Which we
you won't
all
always be.
did. It is worth mentioning. We've all
Oh,
done
of course. Of course. I Pluckers for anybody in Texas. Pluckers was on the menu. It
is
says
that even a word? I've never heard
it
that
is.
before.
Yes, it's a chicken place and it's the home of the freshman 15. That's what they put on the menu.
Oh boy.
And it was great. And so, but salty foods, they don't mess with just your playing, they mess with with everything at some point. And sleep, absolutely. The best trombone players that I can think of, most of them, not all of them, most of them sleep well. And I'm not sleeping well right now because of my baby. It's a worthy sacrifice and something I'm really happy about. But honestly, and I was going to mention this, Alex, in passing, what I've taken as an experiment, like what sucks because I'm not sleeping well. And it's
Is
my
it
low register.
everything? Is it
No,
everything?
particularly it's my low register. I mean, it is everything because you have limited time to practice and you're sleeping a little bit less or a lot less. My low register has been just hollowed out, and that's not typically a spot that like I suffer from,
No, you
but
definitely don't.
the valve register in particular, I'm just having to spend more time. And so as a way to counter that, I'm just making sure that I'm hydrated and doing the best I can. But yes, those are three great points.
Yeah,
Continue,
so
sir.
I'll talk a little bit about food. Make sure you're eating enough protein that you're not always hungry, because when you're hungry, your body doesn't sit in a relaxed state and play very well either. And then fitness, like move around a little bit. You don't have to get, like we all have different things we're interested in. I lift weights. I do a lot of weightlifting. That works for me. Kevin, I know you're a runner. That works for you. One of our good friends, Gabe Rice at BU. Gabe's big into yoga. You
Mhm.
find what works for you. There's no right answer here. The wrong answer is to do nothing, because your body's ability to do things is based on its ability to be doing things regularly. And that shouldn't just be sitting on the couch. And if I promise, if you're 15 or if you're 20 and you're just kind of being sedentary and you're practicing a lot, you're not going to feel it. It's fine. But when you turn 30, it doesn't work anymore. You start to get really sore. You start to have trouble holding the horn up for long periods of time. You play for 3 hours and your back starts to hurt because of the
Oh, yeah.
deloading. That's a weird thing to explain to somebody that's never experienced it. But, Kevin and I both do a decent amount of physical activity, and we know this feeling, and that should tell you that you've got to jump into this like sooner rather than later. The sooner you start taking care of it, the better. So
And
let's
it
go to
rescues your mental state
it
also.
really
All
does.
of
It
that.
really will stabilize you. It makes you tougher, which is
Yeah.
what you need to be able to handle this industry, quite frankly. I'm going to talk money for a second. Uh, you need to get good at saving. And the best way to get good at saving is to get good at understanding your spending. Do not live in a world where you don't know about your money. I'm not telling you how to spend your money. I'm telling you be aware of your money. Track it. Think about it. Remember that if you put $27 a day aside, you've saved $10,000 at the end of the year. That reality means that if you're a college student and you have a 10-hour a week assistantship through work study, or 15 hours a week, and you're getting paid $15 an hour, don't spend that money. Put it into an automated account that you can't control. It's going to save you between $5,000 and $6,000 a year. That's $24,000 by the time you're done with your undergrad. If you invest that in the stock market and you just keep investing, and then you go to grad school, and every year at grad school you work and you put the same amount of money aside, another $6,000 or $12,000 over 2 years. Now we're looking at a number that's like $35,000, $36,000. Accounted for 6 years of growth, we're closer to $45,000. So let's say you have $60,000 of student loans. Well, you're coming out of your master's with 45,000 saved, which is obviously really impressive. But guess what? You're not going to just take $45,000 and pay those student loans off. What you're going to do is you're going to borrow into that account and use it to levy against your student loans, meaning you're going to make your student loan payments from that account so you don't feel them. That account is slowly going to deplete, but remember, it's still accruing interest. And as it accrues interest and depletes at the same time, you're going to be working. And during this working period, you're going to, you guessed it, keep depositing into that account. And what will
Mhm.
happen is by the time that that account runs dry, which is 5, 6, 7 years past this, you will have saved enough money that you will be through most of your loans, and you will probably have an income. You'll have won a job by that point. And if you've decided you don't want to win a job anymore and you've changed career paths, you will have levied enough income and enough savings and enough equity working for a few years and not paying your student loans directly that you can pay off the remainder of the balance and it will be manageable. This is the way to do it. And it's really hard to maintain this level of discipline at the younger ages because you want to spend that money. It's not a lot of money, but it feels like it's your money. I'm telling you that if you're careful with your savings and your earnings and you think like this, it can actually make the ability to go to college and to grad school at these places where you have to take loans out much more manageable. Your student loan interest rates are going to be low. They're going to be low because the government helps subsidize student loans right now. If you are investing in a high yield savings account, that difference between what you're earning in that account and what you are, or like, a stock profile at somewhere like Wells Fargo or, Merrill Lynch or any of these other stock houses, Vanguard, you can name any of them. I'm not trying to advocate for one specifically, but the accrued interest you get on average per year rivals a student loan pretty successfully. And if it's greater than a student loan, it doesn't make sense to ever pay your student loans off. You just keep putting into those accounts and making payments, and eventually your student loans end because
Yeah.
you're always going to beat them with your money. I know this
And,
gets technical, but I have to say it because it makes a profound difference for all of your lives.
and especially if you are between the ages of 18 and 25 right now, but even if you're older, just like it's never too late, in my opinion, to commit to excellence. If you sort of start getting things moving in the right direction, it's not too late to turn things around financially, with a responsible and methodical plan ahead of you. And this is a great plan that you can start to really put into action, I think.
Totally. Here's my last category. This is focus. This one might be the most important. Your focus determines your reality is my favorite quote from all of Star Wars. Qui-Gon Jinn said that. And I think it's really true for what we do in our industry. Unfortunately, your focus has never been more of a low point in our society. Right now, your attention is being mined for data from social media. Doom scrolling is at an all-time high. Your attention, your eyes on the screen literally equates to dollars and data for advertising and for data conglomerates that are selling your data. So the first thing you have to do is get your screen time in control. And that means when you're on social media, which I think is great, and I think you should be on social media, you have to be intentful. Do not catch yourself doom scrolling. I have an emergency trick when I realize I'm doom scrolling, which is 3 or 4 flips through the phone. I immediately take my finger and I move it as fast as I can upward. And I start scrolling really quickly, so fast that I can't see content. What this does is it removes the grasp that scrolling has on your brain, and it shakes you out of it. And then you can close the app without any kind of weird feeling. This is important because you need your focus. You need to train your focus like a muscle. Sleep, we already talked about it, but it falls under this category. Here's the last 2 points: intention. You need to set intentions for what you're doing. Your attention needs to have intention. I'm going to go practice. Yeah, sometimes we throw Netflix on. I understand that. I do that too. But it has to have a purpose, like most of your practice, you should be focused on a specific goal. You should be talking to yourself out loud or in your head. You should be redirecting your guided mind to tell you what you're practicing, because your mind is the most important part of the practice experience. And then the final thing is your social setting. And this one's really important too. Surround yourself with people that are doing the things you want to be doing. I don't want to say that you want to be the stupidest person in the room, and I don't want to say that you want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to be amongst people whose behavior, whose skill, whose work ethic, whose focus, and whose dreams mirror yours. You end up becoming a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? But if you're not spending time with just 5 people, you might be spending it with 10, 15. Make sure that your friends are people that lift you up. Make sure your colleagues are people that lift you up. Make choices about who you spend your time with that are in line with your goals.
Amen to that. And something that really stuck out to me about what you just said, going back to a bit of the beginning, with our attention. Unfortunately, one of our greatest practice tools, the easiest to make use of, is our phone. And I have tonal energy on my phone. I also have it on my iPad, but I look at some of kind of my practice life as pre-tonal energy and post-tonal energy, because I just love the metronome functions of that app. I just really enjoy them. I love the drones. I love everything about it. Especially lately, having a baby, having limited time to practice, being exhausted. When I escape to go practice, I have to kind of grab myself a little bit and say, the phone is going here. You can touch it to change the settings of the app that you need, but you can't, if you're buzzing, you can't just pick it up and open Instagram. You can't just pick it up and open TikTok or look at your email, because everything we do is important. Every foundational thing we work on is so critical. And if I start to just like siphon that attention away, then the next thing I know, I'm working on an excerpt, and after every take, I'm opening up Facebook. And then I'm getting so disengaged, and it's hard, folks. It is
Really,
one of the hardest things we have to do as players right now, but it's important. I promise you, you will see the benefits if you have the discipline. You really will.
yeah. And I'm the crazy person. I have tonal energy, but I barely use it. I use it like actively when I'm trying to use the tracking function or the harmonic function or the spectral analysis function, or when I've got headphones in and I'm playing along and it's kicking drones back at me to make sure I'm playing balanced and on tune.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I use this thing. I'm a big fan of the Korg tuner metronome one in. Like this is, I probably use this thing for about an hour a day. And
Mhm.
I think the thing I like about it is that it is not my phone.
It's analog. Yeah,
It's
I
not
have that exact one also.
Yeah, it's unbeatable. And again, like you were saying earlier, tried and true methods that work.
Korg has gotten at least $500 from me over the past 15 years for broken intentionally, broken unintentionally, and lost
Like that.
metronomes.
I like that. A little bit of rage. Good job.
Exactly.
What's your last
Okay,
point, Kevin? What do you got?
my last point is, and this kind of works off of your first point in a way, it complements it at least, is to aim low. That is to say, we are never better than this foundational practice that we must check in with often and daily, frankly. I've had students who, as they're transitioning towards high school or towards college rather, and I'm asking them what they're working on or how they're going about things. It's very little bit on the warm up and on the foundational side, and it's immediately jumping into, oh well, I'm playing more so for my college audition. So, my fifth note of the day is an E flat before I go dun da 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 da. And it's like, no, my friend, no, 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 no. You don't get to graduate from basic lip flexibilities. You do not get to graduate from long tones, from interval exercises, or from slow practice. Those things are forever. And I cannot remember or give credit to who this was, but someone was at the TMEA All-State concert or rehearsal. I think it was a rehearsal. They were observing a rehearsal and they were trombonists. So naturally, they were looking at trombones. And they were just blown away with these students sat there and they weren't working on the excerpts that they were playing in this concert. They were warming up responsibly. They were doing slow flexibilities, slow articulation, and they sounded fantastic. Okay. And I guarantee you the difference between them and the people that were not there is the people that sit down before a rehearsal and it's time to play the hardest thing on the stand for that upcoming rehearsal. And it's time to play it loud and crass and maybe take it up an octave or do something stupid with it. And that actually delves into a future episode of don't do that in a professional setting ever. But, these are students who are acting responsibly. These are students who are staying accountable to things that are basic and in some cases boring. But my final point, again, which complements a point you've made previous, Alex, is to fall in love with that. Fall in love with doing the most simple things with beauty and ease, and you will be rewarded in that pursuit. And frankly, for me and how I go about things, I get I get lost in the best way when I'm in a good practice session and where I'm doing those slow basic things. I never feel more in tune with the voice that's musically inside my head than when I'm doing basic exercises. It's going well. I'm focused. Everything else that I do thereafter benefits from that. Everything else is easier. It's more rewarding. So don't take those things for granted. Please, please, please. You will not graduate the 3 note slur. You can always get better at it. It can be maddening. You can maybe take it a little too far, but your tendency is to not take it far enough. So that's my final point. Okay, I got 3 questions for you, Alex.
This is the lightning round. I'm ready. I'm amped.
Rapid fire. Let's go. Symphonic composer that you don't feel gets enough credit and that we should be listening to.
Oh, that's so easy for me. Scriabin.
Okay.
If you have not listened to Scriabin's music, do yourself a favor. Scriabin, the best way to describe Scriabin for me is if you take how unbelievably different Debussy was from everything before him. Scriabin is to Debussy what Debussy is to everybody else.
Love
It is
that.
a harmonic color leap forward that cannot be described. And if you are a pianist, Scriabin has a special place because Scriabin was such a masterful pianist in understanding the way the keyboard works physically under hands, that Scriabin's writing both is beautiful from a piano perspective, beautiful from a pianist's perspective, and harmonically unbelievable. Check it out.
I'm sold. Let's see. How does your painting, your art, complement your practice?
Oh, this is interesting. It's so obviously there are a lot of parallels in terms of the approach and the way that we work on fundamentals and the way, the way we work on building out a product. All of the skill sets that are true in music are also true in art, but there's something else that's way different. And it is in the evolution of how a painter comes to be versus how a trombonist comes to be. When you are a musician as a young person in the classical music world, we first in the brass world have to learn the fundamental techniques of how to do the trombone technically, how to play, how to navigate the instrument, being a fighter pilot in the jet. And then once we have mastered the ability to play the instrument clean, understandably, the same way, how to navigate the horn, we can then talk honestly and heartfelt about how to find our own voice. This is the order in which many brass players go through this experience, but painters seem to do it in reverse. Painters have very little difficulty finding their voice. That's a fairly natural thing that happens as an artist. But honing the technique is not. Many artists historically have approached technique. There are many schools of painting. Atelier comes to mind, the traditional French oil painting style for portraiture, where there were schools that, and there still are programs such as this that teach you the fundamentals, but most artists don't grow up in these apprenticeship programs anymore. Most artists learn by themselves. They draw, they take classes, they use the internet to learn, they enjoy art, they consume art, lots of art. But in the classical music world, we don't do it this way anymore. And so if you were to take a college student, let's say a graduate student who's doing trombone performance and a graduate student doing an MFA in painting, the trombonist has a very good command of the fundamentals of how to play trombone. And they are working on learning how to find their artistic voice. A painter at the MFA level has a very good idea of their artistic voice and is trying to master the fundamentals of rendering and of the actual material and medium so that it can be lent to better their artistic voice. So we actually come at it from different angles, and this mentality makes for a very interesting approach to the growth in the I guess discrepancies and deficiencies in my trombone playing.
Thorough. I like
That was
that.
not, yeah, that was not a lightning answer, but it was a good answer.
It was a good answer. Final question. If you could study with any historical teacher of the instrument that's not around anymore, who would it be?
Oh man.
Give me Emery. No,
I think, well, this is a very, very difficult question to answer. There are a lot of names that'd be very interesting. I'd love to talk to people like Carmine Caruso. I'd love to talk to Schlossberg. I'd love to ask Arnold Jacobs some questions, but I think um, I have grown enamored with Toby's stories of getting to study with John Swallow. Um, when Toby was in the Sarasota Orchestra, which was his first job that he won, and I know you know this story, but for our listeners, Toby moved down to Florida for a couple of years, and during that time, he was lucky enough to be in the same place where John Swallow retired. And so John Swallow taught him and basically coached him through his prep, which led him onto bigger orchestras than Sarasota. And some of the anecdotes that Toby shared with me about studying with Swallow and how unbelievably different John Swallow's teaching was compared to anything else he had experienced, and just how pragmatic and kind of like a tinkerer in a toy shop he could be. um I would love love to take some lessons with him. Unfortunately, he passed when I was, I think, a freshman in college. I think he died in 2007. But
There you go. Well, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for
yeah,
joining
thanks
us
for tuning
on
in.
Do I Need a Bigger Mouthpiece? We had a lot of fun recording this episode. We're really excited about the future topics that we're going to bring. Some of the solo episodes that Alex recorded while I was out for a couple of weeks, I'll make it up to him by giving him the week off at some point with some solo episodes of my own, perhaps. And we're just really excited about this, and we hope you get something out of it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, keep listening. Happy practicing. Talk to y'all later.